My intent with this video is not to put anyone down, but to call the truth as I see it so other guys don't follow in the footsteps of disgruntled expats, and so those considering retiring in the Philippines may do so with their eyes wide open and knowing full well what to expect as an expat in the Philippines. Over the past 2 years since the pandemic started, we're seeing more and more expats in the Philippines who seem far more jaded and bitter about their life there. Many have left throughout this pandemic and gone back to their country or have found another affordable country to live in. This really shows me that these guys were never fully prepared for what life in the Philippines is like daily, year after year. They had this vision in their mind that the Philippines is a place to be for relaxation, beautiful beaches and beautiful women. But as the pandemic continued and restrictions were imposed, these guys started seeing a totally different side of the Philippines than they ever imagined. Throw on top of this Typhoon Odette in the Cebu region, where much damage has been sustained, loss of life was terrible, and no food, water or electricity for a good period of time, and the reality of living in a developing country certainly hits home for many of these expats who only a couple of years ago thought the Philippines was the answer to all their prayers. Now, I love the Philippines and the wonderful people, but the reality is life in the Philippines is far more difficult in many ways than life in a developed country. I see so many foreigners fleeing to the Philippines expecting that becoming an expat will solve all of their problems. Many of these guys have become disillusioned with their own government or country, so they flee to the Philippines. Others may see living on a pension in their country as far too difficult or not possible, and so off they go to the Philippines where their money will last much longer. But what comes with this is the fact that you're now living in a developing country where many things are not as automated as you're used to. A country where everything moves so much slower, and this can be very frustrating to deal with daily. And a country where the government decisions around the pandemic and restrictions are seen by these guys as crazy, where some become infuriated by it. These guys must also realise that on top of the pandemic, that the Philippines is the second most natural disaster-prone country in the world, and many typhoons hit that country every single year. What I've seen as a keen observer from afar is that so many expats all loved the Philippines and spoke so highly about the country, right up until things started getting tough over the past 2 years. Now they complain they can't go anywhere. They say each province is the same as the next and so on. All we hear now is the negative and how they're glad that they've left the Philippines or they're going to leave the Philippines. Now, of course, what they do is their business, but it does show how many of these guys go there with unrealistic expectations or like they're on some great big adventure. My view is that many are running away from something in their own country, which could be, as I say, the government, or because of broken relationships, or more commonly, because they can't afford to live in their own country any longer. To me, it seems these guys are very unsettled in life, and they want to continually move every several years or so because they get restless, and they start to see the negative in what was once a huge positive. They were most likely the same in their own country, or now they're looking for more meaning in life as they get older, where they could possibly be fearing dying before they achieve anything of note in their life. My best advice here is not to become like these guys who get jaded and bitter after 5 or 6 years in the Philippines, and to be sure you know what you're getting into before you make this huge decision that you may regret later on. Be sure to go for a very long vacation to the Philippines for a good 6 months, exploring different areas that you may consider living in. This time allows you to see if you can handle the heat and humidity, as well as the many slow, frustrating processes within the Philippines. And of course, you may experience a natural disaster or two whilst there, which seem to shake some expats to the core. You can be sure that living in the Philippines isn't for everyone, especially for those that may have some health issues where they need very good quality healthcare and easy access to certain quality medications. Believe it or not, I've heard of men who have cancer or heart issues who plan to go and live in the Philippines. Now these guys can do as they please, but to me they're certainly going to shorten their lives, as we've all sadly seen on several occasions with some expats already. For those of you who are planning to move, then I say all the best, but keep things real about what the Philippines is and isn't. It can be a wonderful move for certain types of people, but equally, as I've spoken about, and I'm sure many of you have seen for yourself, some guys quickly become bitter and jaded by the experience. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.